Vishnu Gurudevo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hari Om. The fourth chapter has 42 verses entitled Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the yoga of renunciation of action with knowledge. It means that knowledge which enables a spiritual aspirant to achieve salvation while performing action. After having followed the course of Karma Yoga prescribed in chapter 3, it shows the state of development in a seeker. This number 4 has a great importance. There are 4 Vedas, the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. There are 4 directions, east, west, north, and south. There are also 4 goals of life, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. There are 4 saints as well, Sanak, Sanandan, Sanatan, Sanat Kumar. There are 4 yugas, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord has described the 4 types of devotees that are his favorites. The one who is in pain, the one who is curious, and the one who has wants, and the one who has full knowledge are the 4 types of devotees. This chapter starts with a very important statement which proves how old and ancient the Gita is. That Bhagavan, while in the form of Lord Vishnu, had narrated this yoga and the knowledge of the Gita to Surya Narayana, the sun god. Just think how ancient the sun is, shining all through Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and in Kali Yuga. So the Gita is millions of years old. And why was it imparted to the sun god? Surya Narayana is a true karma yogi, working continuously 24 hours a day. Secondly, Surya Narayana is never partial. He gives light to all. He does not love or hate anyone. Without the sun, there is no rain, no farming. There is life in the rays of the sun, and it is the symbol of knowledge and power. Thus, the knowledge of the Gita is ancient and pure, and so far, no one has been able to change or add anything in it, because it came from the lotus lips of Bhagavan himself. And it is that same knowledge which Bhagavan Shri Krishna is now giving to Arjuna at the end of the Dwapara Yuga. Handed down from generation to generation, this sacred knowledge had been lost due to the passage of time, but now the Lord was reaffirming it for the sake of his friend and devotee Arjuna. Not understanding the divine nature of his charioteer, Arjuna immediately asked Krishna, whom he considered to be his cousin, friend, and contemporary, could have revealed all this to the sun god at the beginning of time. Lord Krishna then takes this opportunity to reveal himself as the avatara or incarnation of God, and that he knows the many births that has passed for the both of them. The many births the both of them had taken, while Arjuna does not. What is the difference between a Krishna and an Arjuna? Krishna is consciously divine, while Arjuna is potentially divine. The birth of an avatar is from knowledge to knowledge, with all divine powers and a full awareness and consciousness of his supreme status from birth itself. Human birth is a birth from ignorance and karma phalas, under the shroud of Maya or the cosmic veil, in which all creatures are covered. This veil of Maya has to be removed before the person becomes aware of the divinity within. A guru can impart the knowledge of the self to the extent that he has unfolded the self within. Only a fully enlightened person can become the real spiritual master. Shri Krishna was one such master. What and when and what is the reason for the appearance of an avatar? Verses 7th and 8th in this chapter explain. Yada yada hi dharmasya glane bhavati bharata abhyuktanam adharmasya tadatmanam shrajamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanataya sambhavami yuge yuge. O Bharata, whenever there is a decline of righteousness and a rise of unrighteousness, then I manifest myself. For the protection of the virtuous, for the destruction of the wicked, and for establishing righteousness, I come into being from age to age. When righteousness declines and unrighteousness prevails amongst humanity, the great masters protect the virtuous people and destroy the wicked. Thus the stage is set for the establishment of dharma. Dharma, godliness, piety leads to union with the self. In the Treta Yuga, Lord Rama protected Sugriva and destroyed Vali. Likewise, in the Dwapara Yuga, Lord Krishna protected the Pandavas and destroyed the Kauravas. Adharma, unrighteousness, gave way to the re-establishment of dharma. Self-realized souls have appeared in the world at different periods in history for the purpose of establishing dharma. In verse 4.9, Bhagavan says, thus, he who knows in true light my divine birth and actions, on leaving his body, he is not reborn, but comes to me, O Arjuna. Bhagavan uses the first person singular pronoun, me, to mean, he means Atman, the supreme self within. The self within is paripurna, whole, perfect, absolute, infinite. The Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita declare that thou art Tattvamasi. You are the supreme self within. You are God. Until we realize the essence of this truth, we remain ignorant of our supreme nature. Shri Krishna descended on earth to also uplift the weak and downtrodden and teach us about the glory of God, the divinity in all beings, the wonders of the changing universe and its limitations. The relationship between God, man, and the universe, and the plan and purpose of life. Those who can see the infinite and avatar as one and the same will be saved. Learning about the Leelas and pastimes of the Lord and his teachings helps us to grow in love and devotion to the Supreme and purify ourselves. Without reflecting and understanding the true nature of our very being, our thoughts, desires, mind, and senses are naturally directed to the material world, hoping to fulfill the void within, which can never be appeased by running after the things of the world. These thought currents, emanating from ignorance of the higher self, are desires which force us to undergo the chain of birth and deaths. But the wise person recognizes the play of the self and actions. He realizes the essential nature of the self. Consequently, he entertains no desires. He finds no use for his body anymore. In effect, he abandons the body and merges with his supreme being. Thus, freed from attachment, fear, and anger, absorbed and taking refuge in the divine, purified by the fire of knowledge, many have attained the supreme being, the ultimate state of God realization. The Lord uses me and I to mean the Atman, the self within. The self in the Lord is the self in one and all. It is the enlivening principle in the activities of all beings. Men of different nature, with different levels of intellectual development, interpret God differently. The same electricity operates within instruments such as the fan, air conditioner, refrigerator, and so on. Similarly, the different organs function when there is life in man. The one supreme God gives life to all beings, humans, animals, and plants. They receive help for protection at all levels of existence. Different religions teach a definite system of worship. Men worship according to their belief and understanding. Some condemn the worship of idols, while some find it beneficial. God helps all men to reach their final destination from their divergent paths. It is the same reality that responds benevolently whether man worships through body, senses, mind, or intellect. All beings are resting in the divine love and compassion of God. So every method of worship, including the very rudimentary method, is accepted by God. Those who seek success in what they do, they worship the gods or different deities with relevant attributes. Success is easily attained with sacrifice and worship through rituals for health, for wealth, education, knowledge, fame, and so forth. Everything is eternally born from God as Brahma, sustained in him as Vishnu, and absorbed into him as Shiva. Since the omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient God is beyond human comprehension, our ancient sages, they struck an ingenious plan so that we remember God in everything we do. They divinized everything in the world by creating the concept of various gods and goddesses of the material world. All the gods and goddesses of the Hindu pantheon are glorified for their special attributes, so that their blessings are obtained for the success of any undertaking. The picture or idols of the particular Ishtadeva is enshrined at the altar or in the many temples around us. The gods that Hindus pray to denote the many significant attributes of the one Almighty God, whose power is seen vested through the various gods and goddesses. Example, Ganesha to remove obstacles, Muruga or Hanuman for strength and valor, Shakti in the form of Ma Durga, Saraswati, the bestower of speech and knowledge, and Lakshmi for wealth. Shiva or Krishna for liberation from the karmic cycle of birth and death, etc. Thus, a touch of divinity is lent to all actions and material pursuits. These material successes are not difficult to gain, for quickly indeed success follows concerted effort. But Lord says that compared to spiritual pursuits, all worldly pursuits are easily met with success. However, everything in life is temporary. Supreme knowledge is self-knowledge, which is harder to gain than the results from action. Lord says, Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam, that among all knowledge, I am the knowledge of the self. And one acquires this permanent knowledge after making consistent efforts through many births. Human beings, they actually gravitate to the path of work or the path of knowledge according to their natural tendency. The followers of the gods get their results according to their desires. However, it must be understood that the results of action depend on A, how the action is performed, and B, the attitude of the mind. The attitude of the mind further depends on the inclination, liking for action, the mental development, and the predominant guna or nature of the individual. While one's aptitude depends on his vasanas or the inclination, One's attitude depends on the predominant guna that will affect one's resultant disposition. However, the standards achieved differ in different men, for they are of different temperaments. From the standpoint of the all-pervading Atma or the Self, Shri Krishna claims to have created the four castes based on the inherent tendency called gunas existing in all humans. These four varnas are essential for a well-balanced society. The ones in each group differ in their mental development due to the predominant guna in them. When these fourfold order of varna or nature work in harmony, the society is said to be sound, stable, and well balanced. Being different in their mental development, human beings differ in their aptitude, in their achievements, and in the way of life. A man is not a Brahmin by birth. He is a Brahmin by his sattvic qualities and is spiritually inclined. They become priests who spend their time peacefully, practice dharma, and preach the gospel. A Kshatriya is rajasic by nature and is only satisfied with vigorous action and passion. Kshatriyas form the class of persons who are administrators and warriors. They maintain law and order and defend the country. Vaishyas are merchants, traders, and agriculturists. Those with tamasic tendency tend to be inactive and dull, lacking any particular skill. As Shudras, they form the labor force in a community. No law stops anyone from taking up the work he likes, based on temperament, not birthright. There was no rigidity in the division. It also supports the internal thought forces based on vasanas or inclinations, which results in gunas and actions. Lord Krishna, the pure consciousness, states that he is the author of the castes in the world, but he is not attached to any action nor to the fruits of action. Therefore, he is not tainted by any action. One who identifies with the divine and understands the role of the self or Atma in action gains objectivity. He becomes an observer, a witness, a sakshi of his own life's activities. Desires do not drive him to actions. Actions do not taint him nor bind him. He functions in this world like an actor who knows the difference between his true identity and the role he has to play on the stage of life in the world that he is in. Such actions cannot affect his true personality. He has no interest in those actions for the fruit or the fruit thereof. He remains ever discontented, he remains ever disconnected, disinterested, and detached from the stage. Nothing in the world influences, affects, or binds him. Thus, one who is connected with his real self within gets totally liberated from the cycle of samsara. Then, Lord says that the secret of action, however, is one which has confused the minds of even the sages. There are three types of action: karma, vikarma, and akarma, that is action, special action, and non-action. The common view is that action binds us to the wheel of karma and forces us to take repeated births. But Lord Krishna has already declared that no one can remain inactive even for a moment. Does this mean that we are bound to this wheel, life after life, with no hope or reprieve? The law of karma is misconstrued when we think that only physical action is binding action, and that as so long as we remain physically inactive, we cannot come under the bondage of karma. On the contrary, Lord declares that mental action is what binds us to the wheel of karma. A person can be physically inactive and still be forging links in the chain of karma due to selfish thoughts and emotions. Hence, Arjuna is told of that special karma or vikarma which can transmute the impurities of physical action into the gold of non action. When there is detachment in our mind, our actions cease to be actions and become non actions. This is called inaction in action. Even if the body is active, due to non attachment of the mind to the rewards that might accrue, and due to the love for the universal, the action becomes vikarma or non action. He who recognizes action in inaction and inaction in action is wise amongst men, for he is established in wisdom and is a true performer of all actions, says the Lord. The Karma Yogi's action is a yajna or offering to the Supreme Lord of all action. This is a movement of the universal force within him, the knowledge and understanding that the divine alone is the Lord of all action and that he, an individual, is only a channel through which the divine action flows. This attitude of the Karma Yogi arises because of not having any motive or desires. Where there is no egoism of being the doer, where is the place for desire? The whole world is nothing but Brahman. Atman is Brahman. All the waves are part of the ocean. Similarly, everything in the universe, sentient and the insentient objects, are all Brahman, the substratum supporting the whole universe. Brahman is all pervasive. Yajna brings us closer to God. He who eats the food which remains after yajna is blessed. The jnani considers food, digestion, absorption, and assimilation as Brahman, and to be in consciousness of this truth, many of us recite this verse 24 as a prayer. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavi Brahmakno Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva tena gandavyam Brahma karma samadhinaha. Before meals. One who performs this yajna must attain the right knowledge of sacrifice. This verse gives a clear idea of how a spiritual aspirant should view worldly life. By wisdom sacrifice, jnana yajna, man understands that all beings and objects are nothing but Brahman. One who is constantly established in God only will attain Brahman. As seen in the 3rd chapter, the concept of yajna or sacrifice is a great contribution to spiritual thought. The universe itself was created in the form of a yajna, wherein the Supreme Being himself was the first sacrificial offering, as stated in the Purusha Sukta in the Rig Veda. Bhagavan says that the Creator instilled the idea of yajna along with his creation, and the whole universe acts and moves and has its being in this ideal. The human being alone goes against this universal principle, and thus, as a result, incurs bondage out of ignorance. When the senses are withdrawn and fixed on the higher self, a yajna is performed. When the senses are concentrated on objects which are regarded as helpful in the sublimation of desire, a yajna is performed. When the powers of the mind, intellect, and senses are centered on the consciousness within, a yajna is performed. When the breathing is regulated by the technique of pranayama, a yajna is performed. Whenever we share our joy with another, we perform a yajna. When we give something to another without any selfish motive, a yajna is performed. The feeling of love and kindness is a greater form of charity and a greater yajna than parting with money. It is the feeling that counts, and when that is absent, the outward show of charity is a mockery and cannot be termed as a yajna. Therefore, the sacrifice of knowledge is the highest yajna. When the material offering is given with knowledge and love, it also can be termed as the highest. To understand the true meaning of yajna, the Lord asks us to go and sit at the feet of the sages, whose whole life is a yajna. Attain this knowledge by prostrating yourself at the feet of the wise, rendering them all forms of service, and question them with a guileless heart. Those wise seers of truth will unfold that knowledge to you, says the Lord in verse 34. Ever united with the divine within them, the lofty ideal of yajna can come alive only when we observe the life of a saint. Attend satsangs, associate with the good and saintly, for their lives can teach us through disciplinary action and example what a book or lecture cannot teach. They need no words to teach, as their very existence is an imparting of knowledge. By such association, we will find that the knowledge of the method of this type of action starts to grow within ourselves. As the qualities of desirelessness, equanimity grow in us, so we learn to act in yajna. Verses 31 to 37 point to the fact that all yajnas culminate in wisdom. By converting activities into yajnas, or as a worship done for the Supreme, a seeker drops his vasanas, drops his desires, and gradually gains knowledge of the self. The best of all yajnas is jnana yajna, the yajna of knowledge. One should prepare himself through devotion, enquiry, and service to attract a perfect guru to teach him the knowledge of the self. This knowledge destroys all desires and agitations and removes forever his delusion that the world is real, and arrive at the ultimate realization that I am not this body, I am the soul. Bhagavan Sri Krishna's advice to gain wisdom is contained in the concluding verses from 38 to 42. That the knowledge of the self purifies the mind of all agitations and gives supreme peace. Those devoted to the self control their senses and pursue the self with consistency of faith and shraddha until they reach it. The ignorant, ever doubtful of the self, lack consistency of purpose. They will not achieve anything in this world or the next, nor will they find any enduring happiness. Bhagavan Sri Krishna therefore advises Arjuna to gain knowledge and remove all doubts and delusion, and thus become established in the Supreme Self, follow his swadharma, and to stand up and fight the war. Hari Om Tat Sat. Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Gurudev. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu Om.